It's March 21st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the impeachment ruling for Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. The Constitutional Court says it'll deliver its ruling on the impeachment of the country's Prime Minister over martial law-related allegations next Monday. A ruling date for President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment is yet to be disclosed. South Korea's industry minister has made his way back to the U.S. again to try to remove South Korea from the U.S. Department of Energy's sensitive country list. He's set to hold talks with the U.S. Commerce Secretary over tariff issues on Friday. And talks on Washington's proposal for a partial ceasefire in Ukraine will resume on Monday in Saudi Arabia. U.S. President Donald Trump says his country will sign a minerals deal with Ukraine soon. While the country anxiously waits for the Constitutional Court to announce a ruling date for President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment verdict, the court says it'll deliver its ruling on Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's impeachment in the coming week. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
The Constitutional Court will rule on Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's impeachment on Monday, likely before revealing the date for President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment verdict. On Thursday, the court notified the media that the 8-member bench will deliver its decision on whether or not to uphold the National Assembly's motion to remove the PM from office. In late December, the National Assembly, with an opposition party majority, pushed through an impeachment motion against Han. It accused him of abetting President Yoon's December 3rd martial law and refusing to approve the appointments of 3 Constitutional Court justices. If the Constitutional Court dismisses the impeachment, Han Duck-soo will immediately resume his duties as Prime Minister and acting President. As Han's case is largely relevant to the President's impeachment, it seems the court has deliberated on it first. Yoon's ruling date, however, is unlikely to be announced this week, according to one official. As the court usually gives at least 2 days of notice in advance and tends not to schedule ruling dates consecutively, this means the President's impeachment verdict could be delivered on Wednesday at the earliest. For over 3 weeks, the justices have been convening every day to deliberate on the top-level case, a record period of time compared to past presidential impeachment cases. Park Geun-hye's ruling was out 14 days after her final trial hearing and Roh Moo-hyun's 11 days. It seems the justices are highly conscious that their constitutional decision could have explosive political and social ramifications as protests for and against impeachment grow more ferocious by the day. A poll released on Thursday shows 60% of some 1,000 people surveyed believe the court should uphold Yoon's impeachment, while 35% believe the president should return to office. 57% forecast the court will choose to impeach Yoon, while 34% believe his case will be dismissed. Those supporting Yoon's impeachment wish to quickly trigger a snap presidential election, which polls show would largely favour opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung. Meanwhile, conservatives, including Yoon supporters, are calling for the case to be dismissed, or for the court to deliver a ruling after Lee Jae-myung's own verdict on one of his 5 criminal cases next Tuesday. Experts say the judicial bench is likely fine-tuning the judgment on Yoon's case to ensure it can be broadly accepted by a highly polarised public. With various overlaps in the grounds for impeachment between Yoon and Han's respective cases, the court's ruling on the PM's trial may provide insights into how the justices are deliberating on the president's impeachment. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, the question is, will the ruling for Han be a clue for what to expect from President Yoon's impeachment ruling? We are joined by legal expert Kwon Hyuk-sung this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy to see you again.
Thanks for joining us. So why do you think the court decided to take care of Han's case first? Why not Yoon's case?
Well, in my opinion, there are 2 main factors, a legal factor and a political factor. First, from a legal standpoint, impeaching a president is far more complex than impeaching a prime minister, especially when it comes to constitutional and legal considerations. On top of that, President Yoon is currently under investigation for charges related to leading an insurrection. This means the legal issues and factual determinations involved in his case are much broader and more complicated than those in Prime Minister Han's impeachment. And secondly, from a political perspective, the court may have taken into account the current political instability in South Korea. So if President Yoon were to be impeached and removed from office, it would create a longer vacuum of political power and trigger an early presidential election, which leads to even greater political turmoil. So for these reasons, I think the Constitutional Court decided to take care of Han's case first before Yoon's case.
So considering the gravity and the complexity of Yoon's case, as well as the political instability that we've been experiencing since December last year, now, will the result of Han's impeachment trial then provide any hints about what we can expect from Yoon's impeachment ruling if it does happen next week? Or have I gone too far here?
Well, a lot of people have been speculating about this, and no one can say for sure. But if I had to guess, I would say it's about 50-50. So legally speaking, these two cases are separate. So the decision on Prime Minister Han's impeachment doesn't automatically tell us what will happen with President Yoon's case. It's hard to predict the outcome just based on Han's ruling. However, I can say that there is a connection. One of the key reasons for President Yoon's impeachment is the insurrection charge, and some of the facts related to that also involve Prime Minister Han, at least to some extent. So depending on how the court rules on that part of Han's case, we might get a small hint about how they could approach Yoon's impeachment, but it's still not a sure thing.
Right. Well, I do have to say the court's announcement on Han's ruling on Thursday, which was yesterday, came as a surprise. Is there any possibility that the court will announce the ruling date for President Yoon's impeachment today on Friday?
Honestly, I think the chances of announcement today are pretty low. From what I've seen in the media, there are some press reports suggesting that the court isn't planning to announce President Yoon's ruling date this week. So as reported earlier, under normal circumstances, the court typically announces ruling date 2 to 3 days in advance, giving time to coordinate with Seoul city officials and law enforcement to maintain public order. But at the same time, it's also true that we have been in political turmoil for months now, ever since martial law incident. The pressure on the court to make a ruling quickly is definitely increasing. So while I don't think we'll get an announcement today, but there's no doubt that the urgency around this case is getting stronger by the day.
Indeed, the time is ticking. Then is it safe to say the ruling will be announced next week? Because next week is full of, other significant political events here in South Korea, I have to say.
We can't be sure. Like you just mentioned, next week is packed with several important political trials. Some are even calling it's a super judicial week. So on Monday, the Seoul Central District Court will hold a trial related to President Yoon's insurrection charges. And on Wednesday, the Seoul High Court is scheduled to deliver its ruling on Lee Jae-myung's appeal regarding his violation of election laws. So considering the political impact of these trials, I think the Constitutional Court will likely wait and deliver its ruling after these key trials have concluded. However, at the same time, given how serious this case is, and considering how many people, including some of my fellow lawyers around me, are expressing frustration over the delays, I personally think so. We can say that there's a high chance the ruling will take place next week, but after these trials have concluded.
Well, Mr. Kwon, I have asked this question to all the experts that joined us for On Point this week every single day. Why do you think the ruling day hasn't been announced yet? I mean, why do you think the justices are taking this long?
Yes, so at this point, the whole Korean society has been talking about impeachment so much that it almost feels normal for us now. But let's not forget, a presidential impeachment trial is an extremely rare event, not just in Korea, but in global.
Indeed.
On top of that, not like the precedented the Nomuyon and Park Geun-hye's cases. In this case, we are witnessing an unprecedented situation where a sitting president is actually on trial for criminal charges, and the charge itself is a insurrection. So there are barely any precedents for this case, which means the legal impact and political fallout could be huge. So if I were one of the justices, I would probably want to take my time and be as careful as possible before making such a big decision. And also, since the composition of the Constitutional Court was finalized quite urgently in recent weeks, so that the judges may need more time for discussions and to coordinate their opinions during deliberations.
Maybe it is appropriate for the justices to take this long and really think through to make such a big decision for the country. Mr. Kwon, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
South Korea is pushing for negotiations amid potential new U.S. tariffs and restrictions on scientific collaboration. For that, Trade Minister Han Duck-soo is back in the U.S. for crucial talks. Our Moon Hae-ryun reports.
As the United States prepares to announce reciprocal tariffs next month, South Korea's Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy has returned to Washington in an effort to secure Seoul's removal from its recent designation into the U.S. Energy Department's sensitive and other designated countries list. On Thursday local time, Trade Minister Han Duck-soo spoke to reporters about the government's stance prior to beginning a series of high-level discussions. His first meeting is scheduled with the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright.
Our priority is to seek South Korea's removal from the sensitive and other designated countries list. If immediate removal is not possible, we'll work on alternative solutions to ensure that this designation does not hinder scientific and industrial collaboration between our nations.
If South Korea remains on the list, new restrictions on research collaborations and visits to institutions affiliated with the U.S. Energy Department will take effect starting April 15. However, An gave reassurance that Washington has indicated that the designation is not expected to have a significant impact on bilateral scientific cooperation. His visit comes at a crucial time, ahead of the new Trump administration's anticipated tariff announcement on April 2nd, and securing a favorable position is another key objective for talks. This marks An's second visit to Washington in just 3 weeks, following discussions with the U.S. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick last month, and they are due to meet again.
The Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement has effectively eliminated tariffs between our two countries. However, non-tariff barriers have emerged as a concern. We are actively addressing these issues domestically and will communicate our progress to our U.S. counterparts.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently identified the so-called Dirty 15, a group of countries with significant tariffs on U.S. goods, as targets for the upcoming tariff measures. When asked whether South Korea could be included, An stated it was too early to tell and emphasized that South Korea already imports most U.S. goods without tariffs under the free trade agreement between Seoul and Washington. Regarding a potential exemption from the new tariffs, the trade minister explains that there haven't been many cases where specific countries were granted exemptions, and it appears that the measures will be implemented first before adjustments can be made. He added that ongoing communication and negotiations will be needed to shape the trade framework between the two allies. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
In the meantime, the European Union has pushed back its first phase of retaliatory tariffs against the U.S., originally set to take effect on April 1st. The European Commission announced on Thursday that the countermeasures will now take effect on April 13th and all at once, instead of across 2 stages. The first phase was originally set to levy tariffs on U.S. exports of whiskey, motorboats, and motorcycles to the EU, and the second phase on beer, poultry, beef, and other produce. The announcement also stated the postponement allowed time for negotiations with Washington and that tariffs would be imposed without further delay should they fail to find a resolution. U.S. President Donald Trump says a minerals deal with Ukraine is getting close, while officials from the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia will be in Saudi Arabia next week in the hope of finding a breakthrough in the peace talks. Lee Seung-jae reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Thursday that a minerals and natural resource deal with Ukraine is getting closer. Trump made the announcement at the White House after signing an order to increase U.S. production of critical minerals.
We're doing very well with regard to Ukraine and Russia, and one of the things we are doing is signing a deal very shortly with respect to rare earths with Ukraine, which they have tremendous value in rare earth, and we appreciate that.
Washington and Kyiv said earlier this month that they had agreed to conclude the minerals deal as soon as possible. The comments by Trump also come as he spoke with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Wednesday in what the White House said was a fantastic one-hour phone call. President Trump also said Thursday that progress towards a ceasefire deal between Russia and Ukraine is progressing well.
And we spoke yesterday with, as you know, President Putin and President Zelensky, and we would love to see that come to an end, and I think we're doing pretty well in that regard. So hopefully we could save thousands of people a week from dying. That's what it's all about. They're dying.
Meanwhile, officials from the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine will head to Saudi Arabia next week to hold talks on a potential ceasefire deal. Talks on a U.S.-led proposal for a partial ceasefire will resume next Monday, with Russian and Ukrainian officials holding talks separately with U.S. officials. According to President Zelensky speaking at a news conference in Oslo on Thursday, U.S. officials would meet with Ukrainian experts and then hold separate talks with Russian representatives. The White House issued a statement saying that President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin had agreed to technical negotiations on a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea and a potential full ceasefire and permanent peace during their talks on Tuesday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol left for Tokyo this morning to take part in a trilateral meeting with his Japanese and Chinese counterparts. Throughout his 2-day visit, Cho is scheduled to hold several bilateral meetings with Japan's Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya and China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi. The 3 officials are expected to hold discussions on a wide range of regional and global issues. Now, this marks their first meeting since South Korea's brief imposition of martial law in December, with their last meeting held in November 2023 in Busan. The South Korean men's national football team was held to a draw against Oman in a World Cup qualifying match on Thursday night. Despite playing in front of the home crowd at Goyang Stadium in Gyeonggi-do Province and far outranking the Middle Eastern team, South Korea only managed a 1-1 draw without some players due to injuries. Wolverhampton Wanderers striker Hwang Hee-chan scored in the 41st minute after a sharp pass from Lee Gang-in to put South Korea 1-up. But then Oman leveled up the match with an 80th minute goal. With 3 matches left, South Korea is top of Group B with 15 points from 4 wins and 3 draws. They'll play Jordan on Tuesday at Suwon World Cup Stadium. An annual medical conference took place here in the country with a showcase of how healthcare taps into AI, as well as a growing international recognition in the industry. Our An Sung-jin tells us more.
AI and healthcare. The combination of these is going beyond implementation as companies seek to weave them into our daily lives. South Korea's Health Ministry and the Korea Health Industry Development Institute are hosting the annual Medical Korea Conference to connect those in the field and promote discussions on the implications of this. With a need for more healthcare workers and an aging population, AI integration into people's daily lives has become inevitable, and an expert says this is not as a replacement, but as a helper.
There's no doubt that AI is here to stay in the medical industry. The people who are concerned or worried about AI are going to struggle in the future as AI becomes more and more intercalated into everything that we do.
Alongside the use of smart technology in our everyday lives, Korea is also promoting medical tourism, welcoming those seeking K-beauty healthcare.
An increase in the number of patients visiting Korea for medical purposes implies that not only is our medical technology acknowledged worldwide, but also suggests that we are becoming a focal point for medical tourism in Asia.
As Korea receives more international recognition, medical tourists continue to increase, with the number soon to exceed 1 million. Many Korean companies in the beauty and medical industry are here to showcase their latest trends, as well as to network and find partners. With more tourists spending on healthcare and reinvigorating the economy, companies are aiming to increase their competitiveness in the field.
Due to Hallyu, Korean healthcare products are garnering more attention, and I hope to share this worldwide.
As the country steps up as a medical powerhouse, efforts from stakeholders are set to become more apparent. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Now we take a look at the stories from around the world with our Choi Ji-hee. Good morning, Ji-hee.
Good morning, Tammy.
So Ji-hee, hostilities over in the Middle East are escalating, with Hamas now launching rockets in response to Israel's renewed military operations. Do you give us details?
Right, so Hamas claimed to have fired 3 rockets toward Tel Aviv on Thursday, following resumed military operations by Israel in Gaza. This marks Hamas' first offensive since a ceasefire collapsed earlier this week, following Israel's resumption of air and ground operations in Gaza. The Israeli military reported that one of the 3 rockets was intercepted by air defenses, while the others landed in open areas, causing no casualties. Yemen's Houthi rebel group also fired 2 ballistic missiles at Israel on Thursday, but these were intercepted. Israeli airstrikes have resulted in over 500 Palestinian deaths and hundreds of injuries since Tuesday, with at least 85 fatalities reported on Thursday alone. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has threatened total devastation of Gaza unless Hamas releases the remaining hostages. European Union leaders convened in Brussels for a 2-day summit to deliberate on strengthening defense support for Ukraine. However, the summit concluded without a concrete financial commitment. During the summit held on Thursday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the EU leaders via video, urging them to maintain pressure on Russia through sanctions and to provide additional military aid. However, the EU leaders kept a cautious approach and didn't give a solid answer regarding Zelensky's appeal for approximately $5.4 billion for artillery shells. EU Foreign Policy Chief and Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas had previously proposed a $43.4 billion military aid package for Ukraine, but the plan has faced opposition from several member states. Reaching consensus was further complicated by Hungary's refusal to endorse the summit's joint statement supporting Ukraine. Zimbabwe's Kirsty Coventry was elected as the next president of the International Olympic Committee on Thursday, becoming the first woman and first African leader of the organization in its 130-year history. Coventry secured 49 out of 97 votes, defeating 6 other candidates. 41-year-old Coventry has won 2 Olympic gold medals in swimming and serves as Zimbabwe's sports minister. Outgoing IOC President Thomas Bach was among those sending messages of congratulations to Coventry. She pledged to expand Olympic participation and will officially assume the presidency on June 23rd. Paris is hosting a unique exhibition titled Snoopy in Style, A History of Peanuts and Fashion, to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Peanuts comic strip. The exhibition runs from March 22nd to April 5th, showcasing Snoopy's influence on fashion over the decades. Ahead of the exhibition, dozens of dolls of the cartoon Beagle dog wearing designer clothes were on display in Paris on Thursday. Visitors can explore original comic strips, designer collaborations, and fashion items featuring Snoopy and his sister Belle in the exhibition. The exhibition highlights partnerships with renowned designers such as Karl Lagerfeld and Giorgio Armani.
It's hard to believe that just 3 days ago, the capital was covered in snow. But now, spring warmth is in full swing. Today will be even warmer and temperatures will rise even further over the weekend. In Seoul, we're expecting highs of 22 degrees Celsius on Sunday. The skies will stay mostly clear, but the air quality is not great. With dust continuing to blow in from the west, most areas will see high concentration throughout the day today. Meanwhile, strong wind advisory remain in place along the east coast and gusty winds will continue in those areas. Ulsan and nearby areas are under dry weather advisories. Make sure to stay cautious of fire risks. By the afternoon, we'll see temperatures going anywhere from 1 to 5 degrees higher than yesterday, topping out at 17 degrees in the capital, Daegu, Gyeongju at 22 degrees. The mild and sunny spring weather will continue into early next week. However, the temperature swings will remain quite large, so keep that in mind when dressing for the day.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. A new day at Arirang will be back next Monday at the same time, 10 a.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.
어느 날 바닷가에 갔더니 제가 촬영했던 화장품 케이스들이 떠내려왔더라고요. 그거를 보고 많은 생각을 했어요. 그 어마어마한 양의 쓰레기는 거의 상상을 할 수 없을 정도로 진짜 경이로울 정도로 많습니다. 그런 것들이 이제 너무 이질적으로 보였죠. 그 식물들이 거기서 자라고 싶어서 자란 건 아니거든요. 우리가 버린 쓰레기에서 자란 이 식물들도 우리가 만든 환경인데 어떻게 우리가 그 운명에 대해서 관여를 한 거거든요. 우리가 만든 이 환경에 대해서는 인간이 이거를 관여를 해야 된다고 묻잖아요. 내가 이렇게 한다고 해서 이게 달라지는 건 아니거든요, 세상이. 세상에 당신들이 썼던 이런 물건들에서 이 자라는 식물에 대해서 좀 고민을 해봐라. 자연에 들어가서 주변을 잠깐만 관심 있게 둘러보시면 구석구석에 엄청난 쓰레기들이 많습니다. 당신이 하나 주신 게 수천 마리의 종을 생명을 살릴 수가 있습니다. 나는 쓰레기 더미에서 생명을 발견하는 그리너다.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Friday, March 21st here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and great to have you with us on News Generation. Joining us today is Brooke Prince.
Hello, happy to be here.
Happy Friday, and Yoon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. As our viewers know, every Friday we wrap up the week by discussing issues that resonate with young people around the world. And in South Korea, there's one question that young men inevitably face once they turn 19, which is, when should I enlist in the military? That's because since all able-bodied South Korean males are required to serve for approximately 18 months, this decision weighs heavily on many. But recently, an ongoing debate has gained momentum, which is, should women also be required to serve? So for example, in Taiwan, the idea of extending mandatory military service to women is turning from talk to action. So Wonbin, could you please bring us up to speed on the latest developments in Taiwan?
Absolutely, I can. So last February, the multiple press from Taiwan reported that the Ministry of Defense in Taiwan is reviewing the possibility of women serving in the army. Later on, the spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense announced that it was just under consideration and nothing official was going on or being planned to be executed. However, for countries like Taiwan or Korea or Hong Kong, where we do have national defense issues, it is inevitable for this constant debate of women and men participating in the army together to occur.
Definitely. So as Wonbin just mentioned, mandatory military service isn't unique to South Korea or Taiwan. So we're going to take a look at some other cases. So Brooke, are there any other places where both men and women are required to serve?
Yes, female conscription actually does exist in several countries, and this is driven by both security needs and gender equality efforts. In Israel, for example, women have been required to serve since 1948, primarily in non-combat roles, but an increasing number are now serving in combat units as gender roles evolve and regional conflicts intensify. Sweden reinstated gender-neutral conscription in 2017, with women now making up 16% of conscripts. Ukraine expanded female military service after Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea to strengthen its defense amid ongoing security threats. Meanwhile, North Korea mandates military service for both genders to maintain a large, trained military force. Also, Bolivia, along with Norway and Finland, has integrated women into its military in order to enhance defense readiness. So, yes, this debate is happening around the world. Several countries have decided to implement mandatory military service for women, and we'll have to see what the future holds for South Korea in terms of this hot issue.
Right. So before we dive deeper into the bigger picture, we're first going to connect with a Taiwanese Gen Z to hear about what's driving this policy shift and how it's being received in Taiwan. Stay tuned.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
So today we're pleased to welcome Taiwanese Gen Z Tai Yu to the show. Welcome, Tai Yu, to the show. Good morning. So Tai, we'd first like to ask you, what factors led the Taiwanese government to consider extending military conscription to women? Could you provide more explanation on that?
I think there are a few important reasons why Taiwan is thinking about making women serve in the military. And first, Taiwan's birth rate has been decreasing for years, meaning fewer young men are available for military service. And if this continues, Taiwan could face a severe shortage of soldiers, so the government sees women's conscription as one possible way to fix this problem. Second, the situation around Taiwan has been tense recently, especially with China increasing its military actions and making threats near Taiwan's airspace and waters. And because of these increased security threats, the government is considering drafting women to strengthen the military and help protect the country. And third is that Taiwanese Taiwanese society has changed a lot, especially gender equality and equal responsibilities for men and women. People today care more about fairness and equality, and extending conscription to women fits these values. The government sees it as a step forward, more equal participation and meeting public expectations.
So I'm curious, how has the public reacted? Is there a divide in opinion? And what do younger generations think about this?
Generally, most people in Taiwan support the idea of women's conscription, but opinions are still pretty divided. Recent surveys show about 56% of people support drafting women, mainly because of security issues and changing attitudes toward equality. Given the current situation, those who support it think it's fair and makes sense. However, some people still disagree. They're worried about traditional gender roles, physical differences, or whether the military can effectively handle this change. There are also concerns about how mandatory service might impact women's education, careers, and personal lives. Younger people usually have a more positive attitude toward women serving in the military. They think it's fair, equal, and fits well with modern values. However, even among younger generations, some still have concerns, especially about how practical it would be to implement this change, including training conditions and how it might affect women's futures. And while there's increasing support, people still have mixed feelings, and it's an ongoing discussion.
No, I see. Well, thank you for giving different perspectives about this topic. Now, do you personally think that Taiwan will implement this change in the future?
I personally think Taiwan should carefully consider introducing women's conscription, but it might be better to start with voluntary service first, rather than immediately requiring women to serve. And the government could encourage and offer incentives for women to volunteer. This way, Taiwan can gradually adjust the military's infrastructure, training, and overall environment to better accommodate women. If voluntary enlistment works out well, the idea of mandatory service for women might become more accepted by the public over time. So taking a step-by-step approach can also help to solve the practical problems and give society more time to adapt. I think using a thoughtful and gradual approach might help Taiwan build a stronger and fairer, more effective military force.
All right, Tai, thank you so much for joining our show today, and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so as we mentioned at the top of our broadcast, this debate regarding military conscription for women isn't new to Korea. It has been circulating for years, but it kind of was reignited after Taiwanese government. There was news that the Taiwanese government is considering a female military conscription. So Wonbin, can you help us put this discussion into context?
Yeah, it's a very sensitive topic in Korea as well. If not, it's considered like the forbidden topic when you're socializing with people, especially when there's both men and women on the table, because everybody has like such different opinions on it. And again, like you said, this topic has been circulating in Korea for years, if not probably decades, since our parents' generation. And how the topic did come closer to the surface more than ever in 2025. And as a person who completed the military service in the front line, let me give you guys some additional context. So first and foremost, South Korea is in the state of armistice. This means that technically we are still in war. Therefore, as sensitive this topic may be, it is very important for us to clearly discuss the sustainable method of maintaining the national defense of our country. However, recently, due to multiple reasons such as declining birth rate, it is becoming more challenging for Korea to maintain its national defense only with men. And I personally think that having this debate, like young people having this debate or people having this debate, is healthy as long as it is done respectfully and rationally. But inevitably, it does sometimes lead to gender conflicts or inequalities as well. To give some illustration on this hot debate, there were multiple petitions made through the Blue House petition, and one of them for women to be included in the conscription as well. And one of the petition got almost 300,000 signatures, which is a notable number. So this is just one example that shows how much of a hot potato this topic is in Korea.
Right, it is definitely a hotly discussed topic here in the country. So we're now going to break down the public sentiment in South Korea a bit more, and also what the main arguments for and against making military service mandatory for women. So could you please start us off?
So starting with the public sentiment, KBS recently released surprising survey results showing that a majority of Koreans now support mandatory military service for women. So if you take a look at the screen, according to this poll, 54% of respondents were in favor of female conscription, while 34% opposed it and 12% remained unsure. Support was notably higher among men, with 66% in favor and 27% against. But women also responded relatively positively, with an impressive 43% supporting conscription. However, 40% still opposed the idea, so it is still contested. But these results do suggest that younger generations in Korea are maybe becoming more open to the idea of women serving in the military, perhaps potentially as a step towards greater gender equality. And in fact, as mentioned earlier, several countries, particularly in the Nordic region, have already implemented or are moving towards female conscription. And it's for the same reasons, in order to have a more gender-neutral military, to have gender equality. In the Swedish military, for example, gender equality and gender harmony are considered these fundamental principles that actually shape the military operations and the overall service culture. Additionally, Denmark, which previously only allowed voluntary female service, announced plans in 2024 to make it mandatory for women. And again, they said it's because it's for the pursuit of complete gender equality, which of course sounds wonderful, right? But there are drawbacks to making this service mandatory for women, and one of the biggest ones is the safety issues and guaranteeing equal treatment. And I think that we would need to address those in order for this to be a viable option for Korea.
Right, and I now want to ask your personal take on this issue. I think we can get some diverse opinions because, Brooke, you haven't served in the military, but Wonbin, as you mentioned, you served at the front line.
I have.
You finished your mandatory military service?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
So we're first going to start with Brooke. What do you think?
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for people in the military, and being an American, I really strongly believe in personal freedom. So I think that women should have equal opportunities to serve, but I don't think anyone, man or woman, should be forced to serve in the military. I've spoken to a lot of Korean men about their time in the military, and many of them talk about it, with a sense of pride that they've fulfilled their national duty, but there's also an underlying sense of resentment and sadness, and I really empathize and understand it because it's a big disruption to someone's life.
Because it's 18 months.
Exactly. It interrupts your career, your social life, everything. So I personally think instead of conscription, voluntary-based military service has many merits, and that's what the U.S. does. And they make it a very appealing career. They offer competitive pay and various benefits, career training. It's all incentives-based, and that's how we get so many recruits. And what this does, it ensures that everyone who joins the military is doing it willingly. And that means that the force is going to be more motivated, there's better morale, better performance. And so I would love to see South Korea to at least consider the idea of a volunteer-based military service. That way they could preserve the national security while also respecting people's personal and individual freedom.
We'll have to see where this heads. And what do you think, Wonbin?
Well, as a Korean man who served the army, I feel like there's a puzzle in front of me and I have to solve it very carefully. Like my hands are sweating. But
a very tricky question, isn't it?
I'll try my best. So, to address the elephant in the room, so do I think if women should serve in the army? The short answer is no. However, I do think that they must be prepared to protect themselves if the worst scenario happens. And let me carefully elaborate on my answer. So obviously, there will be exceptions, but I personally believe that men and women do have some differences in physical capabilities, and that is that generally, men are stronger than women. And because of this, I believe that most men are more suitable to serve, to do their duty in the army compared to women. However, this doesn't mean that women will be safe from wars or any battles or combats. Therefore, I think the Ministry of Defense of Korea must come up with a relatively shorter training program for about 2 to 3 months that can help women to learn the basic knowledge of combat and battles as well. So for example, let's say worst case scenario, like there are no soldiers around you and all you have is a weapon or a pistol or a frag grenade. You at least have to know like how to hold a gun or what a bullet looks like and what it feels like. Yeah, how to load it into the magazine and how to load it or how to pull out the pin from the grenade. It's just to do the basic minimum of protecting yourself. Yeah. And I personally never complain about women not serving in the army, but because, like we mentioned, South Korea is still in the state of war, I think it is crucial that every single person in Korea knows how to protect themselves when the time comes.
Right. Self-defense is so empowering.
It is definitely, and I think that not many people actually know how to use those weapons, like the basic knowledge.
Yeah, it's difficult to know without any hands-on experience.
Definitely.
So.
All right. So for more opinion, we asked our viewers if they think women should be required to serve in the military. And here are the results of our Arirang News YouTube poll. So 65% said yes, while 35% said no. And here are some comments. Our first comment for this Friday is by Kim Terry. Korean men cut back their university education to serve in the military. This makes it harder to find a job when you get out because your work skills in your field have dropped behind by 18 to 22 months. CKATKF26 says, in modern society, gender equality should extend to national duties as well. If men must serve, women should also contribute equally to the country's defense. Hisminai7397 says no, because no one should be forced. So based on our poll, we can see that more than a half of our viewers who voted in the survey, they say they are for female military conscription. So looking ahead, do you think South Korea will actually implement this female conscription? And what do you think the future of Korea's mandatory military service will look like?
Well, I think female conscription in South Korea is uncertain. The future is very uncertain, but it's a very relevant topic. I'm glad we're talking about it today. And I think it is a very real possibility if things don't change. We talk about it a lot, but Korea has a very low and steadily declining birth rate, which means that the military continuously faces these growing manpower shortages. So advocates of mandatory female conscription say, well, here's a way to address that problem and also promote equality at the same time, while others like myself argue that transitioning to an all-volunteer military instead would be perhaps the better option. So against the backdrop of this hot debate, alternatives like recruiting perhaps foreign mercenaries that may become necessary. I do think if we decide to implement the female conscription here, it has to include strict protections against gender-based violence and harassment. There needs to be avenues for people to go to if something happens to them in the service. You have to make sure that it is a safe environment for everyone. So I really hope that no matter which path that Korea goes down, it's fair and equitable for everyone. That's my hope. I can't see the future, but yeah, that's my dream for Korea.
I mean, I feel like this topic requires a lot of discussions for us to effectively navigate through and reach a conclusion, right?
Right. Well, it's like our interview guest. She said, I don't think this should happen overnight. It needs to be a very gradual
step-by-step
change
process,
because it would be a huge deal in Korea, right? It's been only men for all of this time. I think they do need to talk about it quite a lot.
It will definitely be a big change for both males and females. So now I want to ask the same question to Wonbin.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you guys. And because of those reasons, which I will explain shortly later, I think shifting to voluntary military service is more realistic than including women to serve in the army. Because I can give you guys some insights here because I've been to the army before, but another small thing to point out is the lack of infrastructure. Now, I'm not saying this is bad, but this is just because of the characteristics that the army had.
The history.
Yeah. The facilities or buildings or barracks in the army or any military bases, it's very difficult to find basically bathrooms or lockers or shower booths, that the areas that are gender sensitive, it's very hard to find them divided. So for example, let's say there's one building of a full barracks where like 200 people would sleep and eat. There would be maybe one bathroom area where it's divided for men and women, and the rest would just be like a co-ed bathroom. So it's going to take a lot of time if women in general begin to participate in the army. So instead of that, I think that voluntary system would be much more efficient and less time consuming as well, because there will be less adapts that we would have to make. And I agree with everything that Brooke said earlier, and one thing that I want to point out furthermore is the proper reward and the respect. All individuals serving in the army must receive social respect and the proper compensation for them to be motivated to have pride in defending their own country, especially if we move to a voluntary system.
Right, definitely a lot of more respect needed for those in uniform. And that's all we have for today and this week for News Generation, but we will be back next Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks to Brooke Prince.
It was a great discussion.
Thank you. And Yoon Bin.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for staying with us and hope you join us next week as well. We are News Generation.